Welcome to the Tulsa Beacon Weekend with Charlie Biggs on KCFO.
Hello and welcome to Tulsa Beacon Weekend. I'm your host, Charlie Biggs, publisher of the Tulsa Beacon newspaper, Tulsa's family newspaper, and joining us in studio is Linda Murphy, who is the former education advisor to former Governor Frank Keating. It's great to have you on the show, Linda.
Hi, thanks. Glad to be here.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the biggest topics in Oklahoma right now and probably across the country is public education, and the biggest topic within that topic is Common Core. And we've had a vote, I guess Tuesday of this week. The show airs on Saturday, but a vote on Tuesday on a bill that was supposedly to cut back the influence of Common Core. But you have studied this issue in depth. Kind of give us an overall summary.
Okay, Charlie. There is repeal language in the bill, House Bill 3399.
Right.
When it came out of the House on March the 12th, late on a Wednesday night, the repeal language had been added to House Bill 3399. There was a much stronger bill that took care of the testing and a lot of other things, leaving the academic standards in place.
Right.
That was in the House. But that bill was not allowed to go forward because a lot of people fighting this had gone ahead and agreed that we would just try to delay Common Core. Then some of us were fighting to repeal it. We're not going to say delay it because that really puts it in place. Since it's already moving forward, it won't stop it.
Right.
And so we knew it needed to be repealed and more. There are other details. But the repeal language, which is now in House Bill 3399, came through the House, went to the Senate. When it came to the Senate, before it was voted on this past Tuesday, and it was passed through the Senate, it was changed, and a lot of new language was added. There are 68 pages in the new version of House Bill 3399.
68 pages?
68 pages. There were 8 pages in the one that came out of the House.
But now they're presenting this as they're not they're eliminating federal control via Common Core, and they're putting this back in the lap of the State Department of Education. Is that a true representation of that bill?
Well, that's partly correct, but you have to get more details to really see what that means. It sounds good. We do want the federal government out, of course.
Right.
But the fact is they weren't in control of the Common Core state standards. Now, they love them. The Obama administration, Arne Duncan, Federal Secretary of Ed, loves Common Core, pushes it.
Yeah.
They put out the money to get us into it in the first place. But to say they control the standards, they didn't. It's the National Governors Association that produced the standards and got those into our state laws by agreeing with the Obama administration on this Race to the Top grant.
And that's a pathway, though, isn't that, to what really Obama wants?
Right, it is. I mean, he definitely wants it. Absolutely. Right. So it fits right into the whole agenda for transformation of America, not just of education, but education and the economy. But there's a history through the National Governors Association for years back.
And Mary Fallon is the president of that now, right?
She is the chairman of the National Governors Association since July. That's right.
Will she sign the bill that was passed in the Senate Tuesday?
That's what happened. There was an agreement made before the press release was put out by the senators that revised the bill that passed the House.
Okay.
And that agreement was that the governor would be willing to sign this new version.
Well, it's passed in the House, goes to the Senate. How can the Senate amend it without going back through the House?
It is back at the House now, and they do have to approve this version if it's going to go on. So the House gets to vote on it, and that's what's coming up next.
Okay. Do you anticipate a passage of that?
I hope it doesn't pass as written. There are a number of points that were added. As I said, 68 pages were added to an 8-page bill.
That sounds like the Obamacare legislation.
It does. Now, granted, a great number of those pages are just marking through an item that is marked through everywhere it appears in law. Unfortunately for us, that item is very important. That is the pass standards, which we have, and we still have this year. Our teachers are going to have students in testing very soon over those past standards. So they've been allowed to continue in this transition toward Common Core to have the PASS document, which is the academic standards that were created with teachers in Oklahoma before Common Core. And what this number of pages do is mark out the past, so it's removed from law.
Okay, so if this bill does not pass for some reason, if it gets locked up for some reason, there's a lot of elements of Common Core that would be automatically implemented in public schools. Is that right?
Right. We are on track to go ahead because Janet Barisi, our state superintendent who is elected this past summer, I will say feigned trying to let the public know that we're moving away from Common Core politically, of course. She did this and renamed Common Core in Oklahoma, started calling it Oklahoma Academic Standards, OAS.
Okay.
That sounds good, but it's renaming Common Core. And everyone that's analyzed this, not only myself, but a number of people in our state have analyzed this, and absolutely it is Common Core.
Now, to some level, Janet Barisi and Governor Fallon have supported Common Core.
Absolutely supported it,
right,
all the way. And this is very shocking because I served in Governor Keating's office as education advisor, and at that time I had run statewide.
And she was lieutenant governor, right?
Mary Fallon was lieutenant governor. So on the campaign trail, very important point in the history of this, Mary Fallon supported everything I said in opposition to the control of education from the top down, that it would not be good to have centralized control outside of local schools. And she has said all of this time that she's for local control. Right. Even over this last year, but has pushed the Common Core state standards, supported them, and really dug her heels in politically to keep them. So there was an agreement made on this new version, this long version of the bill that just came through the Senate was agreed upon, and unfortunately some of our folks that have fought Common Core said this is the best we can get. But when you break it down and see what was added to this new bill, there is wording in there that does not give us a real opportunity for new standards, which is what they're saying we are doing.
You're listening to Tulsa Beacon Weekend. I'm your host, Charlie Biggs, publisher of the Tulsa Beacon newspaper, Tulsa's family newspaper. And if you want to find out why a Republican senator killed the Merry Christmas bill by State Representative Ken Walker, we have a report on that at the Beacon this week. Pick up a copy of Tulsa Area Quick Trips or call 918-523-4425. I always say that too fast. 918-523-4425, and we'll sell you a subscription, or go online at tulsabeacon.com. We're talking with Linda Murphy, who is a former advisor to former Governor Frank Keating, and we're talking about Common Core education. Now, Linda, one of the things I perceive about Common Core is the people that propose it, particularly at the federal level, every time you come up with a objection to it, they say, well, that's not true. For instance, they'll say, we don't want somebody in Washington, D.C. to control our curriculum. And they say, oh, no, Common Core has nothing to do with curriculum. But that's not true, is it? That's
right. And you're hitting the real heart of this is in the testing and assessments that are Common Core items being tested and assessed. We have those tests ordered for the students of Oklahoma starting next year, fully implementing this assessment system. One of the vendors is Measured Progress, and Measured Progress is a nonprofit organization that works with the Federal Department of Education through PARC, which is one of the consortiums of states that Janet Barisi joined and was on their board. And when we got enough public awareness that PARC was a problem on that issue, she backed out of that and said, I'm no longer in PARC. We're withdrawing from that, and we're going to do our own contract. Well, our own contract, which she recommended to the state board and they approved, is with Measured Progress, this nonprofit. They say in all of their documents they work directly with PARC. They also work with McCrail, which is Mid-Continent Regional Education Laboratory, now renamed to McCrail Mid-Continent Research in Education and Learning, a nonprofit which says on their site they are federally funded. They are training our teachers. They want to. I don't know if this is set up yet, but this is their appeal on all the documentation from our vendor, Measured Progress. says that McCrail trains teachers in how to teach so students can pass the tests.
Right. So they say we're not going to do this, but we're actually going to do this.
Absolutely. And we have nothing in House Bill 3399 that addresses the testing. And it is ordered.
Well, I'll tell you, I've got a close friend of mine who is a biology teacher in an area high school. He goes to church with me, and he says he cannot teach hardly at all anymore because of the amount of testing that goes on and the pressure to teach to the test rather than to teach the subject.
Exactly. And even teachers and teachers unions, the OEA, when they rallied at the Capitol on Monday, I know the big push is funding and has been for a long time, and some people never have another message but funding, funding. We know that. Right. But take that off the top and looking a little deeper, many of the teachers there were holding up signs. I need to teach, not test. Let me teach the students, not to the test.
Right.
And all of this over-testing, we've already seen this in Oklahoma. Hours and hours and hours of testing. Jinx Public Schools had a real parent uprising with all the hours.
A revolt, yeah.
Absolutely. And even some of the administration did not try to quell that expression of frustration because they know the testing is excessive.
Well, the people that are opposed to Common Core are not opposed to standards, and they're not opposed to some kind of measure of the success of public education, are they?
Exactly. And even on the national level, at the National Governors Association years back, a lot of people got on board with the idea of setting a set of standards out there, so to speak, so that every state can make sure that they're meeting some standards that others think are important too across the nation, but not with the testing. Right. Not with the tie-in.
Yeah, but you know, in a sense, the ACT, the SAT, those are national scorecards.
Right.
You know, I mean, you want obviously you want everybody to learn how to read and write. You know, and there are certain basic standards that you want in education. You don't want kids that can't read to be passed from grade to grade to grade. But the problem is the issue of federal control.
Exactly. And unfortunately now, Charlie, the ACT and SAT, I can't even recommend those as a substitute because they are being aligned with Common Core. And the man now in charge of the College Board is David Coleman, who worked in Obama's campaign with data. He's the one driving the Common Core state standards through a group called Achievement Partners, and Achieve is the organization he has worked with now that wrote the Common Core state standards. David Coleman, he says that this will be a shift in standards, assessments, and curriculum. That's on video.
Well, here's the danger, too. When you have people like that in charge of the ACT and the SAT, not only can they impose their will on the curriculum in public schools, but Christian schools, private schools, homeschoolers,
exactly.
You're going to go, well, I've got to teach my homeschooled child what he's going to have to know to pass the ACT. And guess what? That kind of information, I can tell you from what I've seen, that it's not going to have any kind of biblical perspective.
No, it isn't. And in fact, most of it is not even academic. There's an awful lot of assessing of what we call the affective domain, the emotions and feelings, values, attitudes, and beliefs of students.
2 + 2 = 5?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not important that you missed a number. It is, why did you get there? How did you explain to me? How do you feel about this?
The processing is what they're focused on that. Absolutely. Right. And a lot of that math, instead of a 2-step problem, they've turned it into a 20-step problem where the student has to write down each step and explain it. And we have kids in 2nd grade that are answering very commonsensically saying, when they're asked, how did you get this answer, instead of writing these 20 steps that are a process that they're supposed to learn, they say, it came in my head. Well, how about that? God made our brains that work very well. If we have quick, accurate understanding of how to calculate, we don't have to figure out how we figured it out.
Well, I have a brother that teaches in public school, that teaches math, and I asked him, how has math changed in the last 30 years? He said, it hasn't changed. This is hogwash.
Exactly.
2 + 2 = 4. If you write down 5, you're wrong.
Exactly.
And you need to have that put right in front of you and said, you need to go back and figure this one out.
Yes.
And have we abandoned learning by rote?
Well, unfortunately, that is what the real proponents of this say. Now, in Oklahoma, you will hear people say who are not informed fully about Common Core and have not fully implemented it, but have been introduced to just the standards, and then they've been told by our State Department of Ed, you can do it how you want to. You can make your own methods, your own curriculum. That is a deception, just a flat lie.
Well, it's like we talked about
because the
before.
assessments will require certain things to be done.
Right.
And so the proponents of this that wrote the standards say, and it's on video all over the place, it's documented, you don't have to guess about it, they say it's the processing. We don't want flashcards. We don't want quick flashing of information that they memorize. Well, we know that young children learn quickly and easily how to calculate by getting their addition facts as a foundation to build and then to be able to reverse that operation with subtraction, and they understand that
like
once they're firm in it.
Yeah, like sponges. They
Exactly.
can, as we get older, it's harder to learn this stuff.
Yes.
And to abandon this time-proven method of teaching, and we are really doing a disservice to this generation, aren't we?
Exactly. And again, it's confused because some teachers who think they're teaching Common Core and love it still use flashcards, but they haven't seen the big picture yet.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, what percentage of funding for public education comes from the federal government? Under 10%?
I think that's about right, but honestly, I would have to see. And another thing about that, though, Charlie, that gets into the realities of it, big city schools like Tulsa, where there's a lot of socioeconomic need in one system, get hundreds of millions of dollars in federal directly to a big city school like that.
There's the hammer right there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So in other words, we have these standards. We want you to teach this way and teach this stuff. If you don't do it, we're going to slowly or quickly withdraw this federal funding, and that terrorizes these school boards and superintendents.
Right, and we get big leaders like Keith Ballard in Tulsa will stand up and just tell us we've got to keep doing this. He said the other day, I think in your paper, that he was going to keep doing Common Core even if the legislature stopped it. So
I know. See, it's funny because what do you have? 59 schools that got an F, and he has a press conference and says, you know what? I just don't believe in the standard. I don't believe in the standard. It wasn't. We have a lot of work to do. We have to educate these kids. We need help. It was. I just reject this evaluation. You imagine if in a classroom, if a student got a test and got an F and went up to the teacher and said, I reject your test.
Right.
What? Well, that's pardon me for getting that rabbit trail, but. And by the way, Keith Ballard makes $260,000 a year, and he's up there Monday screaming for more money for teachers. Well, I tell you what, why don't you take a little pay cut and buy a few pencils and erasers for some teachers?
Right. His administrative salary absolutely needs to be examined as part of the budget and seeing where the money is going. One thing that I do not appreciate that he said in the Tulsa World was he was asked about the 60% of fourth graders in Tulsa that don't read on grade level. He did not dispute that.
Right.
He answered that his resolve for that, or his resolution, would be that he needed more technology and longer school days.
Okay.
Those things do not affect a child that can't read that needs to learn to read. They need a lot of one-on-one. They need phonics. They need all kinds of methods to reach an individual child that might not learn well one way but will another way. And a lot of that has to do with English language learners that are not getting a good foundation in English but are being continued in their own language, then try to read English. They don't have the language in reception, in hearing and understanding it, or in speaking it yet. So they're not going to be able to sit and read it well.
You're listening to Tulsa Beacon Weekend. I'm your host, Charlie Biggs, publisher of the Tulsa Beacon newspaper, Tulsa's family newspaper. And if you want to find out why a GOP senator, a committee chairman in Oklahoma City, why one killed the Merry Christmas bill and the other one killed a pro-life bill, we have a reporter on that at the Beacon. Pick up a copy at Tulsa area quick trips. Call 918-523-4425. 918-523-4425 will sell you a subscription. We're talking with Linda Murphy, who has done some extensive research about Common Core, is a former the top education advisor to former Governor Frank Keating. Linda, let me ask you this question. Who has a better grip or a better chance of educating children? A motivated, caring teacher in a classroom in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or a federal bureaucrat in Washington, D.C.?
Oh, absolutely. That teacher that's there with that child daily, that cares, that knows the child, working with parents who, I don't know many parents that don't love their children. Some of them don't do a lot outside of the schoolroom for them educationally, and it's usually because of things in their own life. But teachers are the answer to turning this around, especially when children are younger and they don't even have the foundations of reading, writing, and math.
Right. And there are some wonderful teachers in the public school system.
Absolutely. We have many teachers who care about their students deeply, and it's very hurtful when they can't teach the way they know they need to teach, that they've been successful in teaching students, and now they're being told they're ineffective. They're going to be evaluated on a new system with these testing assessments that I'm talking about with Common Core. That's not going to be stopped in 3399. Those tests are coming until we get that stopped.
And, you know, from a philosophical standpoint, for 25,000 people to go down to the Capitol and demand more money for education, and yet we have this, it's a growing problem in terms of our we're not preparing, you know, these kids. I mean, they're not learning to read and stuff. So it's the only thing I know of where they want to pump more money in, and we're not guaranteed better results.
Well, here's what we have. Overall, I hear what you're saying on the top layer of it.
Right.
The OEA, the NEA branch of the teachers union in Oklahoma, OEA, which is huge, has like 30,000 members, I believe. That is one of, you know, the major factors in the rally, getting the teachers to focus on funding. Now, some schools are in dire straits with funding.
Right.
I do not believe that the A through F report card is great because it's based on this assessment system that I have such trouble with. There are problems with it. But I also agree that the administrative salaries need to be considered when they need a needs-based budget in every school every year, going back to the ground of the need, putting that on paper, and then what funding they have. And if there is a need not being met, that can be looked at individually instead of saying we need this much more money, and we hear that all the time from some of these people. The OEA, NEA has taken Bill Gates' money to push Common Core on the national level. The OEA in Oklahoma has not come out against it, although some of the members at one point thought they were going to. They did not. So the OEA is a big problem in setting the message of that rally, but I know hundreds of teachers that have been working with me this last year over the state, and some of them I've known for years, some of them all their lives, all of my life, that know that funding is not the major issue in their school, and they're there because of the testing, because of Common Core, and there were T-shirts being worn. A group in Edmond of teachers very bravely wore their No Common Core T-shirts to that rally and talked to people about how we've got to stop it.
You know, another problem that Common Core proponents say is not a problem is that really at the heart of Common Core is they would like to take your third grader and run a test on him and say, you know what, you're going to be a welder, or you're going to be a nurse, or you're going to be, this is your career path. We're going to set you on this path because this is what our business leaders think you should do.
Yes.
And you don't really have the freedom or the capacity to chart your own course.
Yes.
And they'll deny that, but that's true, isn't it?
Absolutely. And Charlie, this is starting to roll out a little more clearly in Oklahoma into the public view because Mary Fallon, our governor, last July did become the chair of the National Governors Association.
Right.
At her press conference, she held up a beautiful blue brochure called America Works. Right. Last Wednesday in Oklahoma City at the Cox Center, she had a number of educators brought in for the America Works conference, and they made very clear that they are going forward with college and career ready standards, which is Common Core, and the benchmarks will be met. Well, one of the recommendations I'm making on House Bill 3399 goes to the point of the American Diploma Project. The American Diploma Project was put into law in Oklahoma law, and it's there, and that we will meet their benchmarks. That part needs to be struck out of the bill. It's been printed in House Bill 3399 because they struck out the pass, which is the academic standards teachers have been allowed to use through this year. I say we need to leave the pass in there and take the American Diploma Project and its benchmarks out. They're on page 31 and 32 of the recent version.
Yeah, I don't want to tell a kid in third grade that, you have any limits, because I believe that, they have great potential. Every kid has great potential.
Yes.
Now they won't all achieve that potential, but to say, I'm going to pigeonhole you,
yes.
and because the economy needs welders, you're going to be a welder, that's just wrong.
Exactly. And Governor Frank Keating, I served in his office, as you know, in 1995. I ran statewide in 94 and got 49.5% of the vote statewide. And a lot of the issue was this same plan, but then it was called outcomes-based education
Right.
and school to work.
Right.
Now we have Common Core and America Works.
Because they're in charge of the rhetoric, and they don't want that.
Exactly.
They want to negate the criticism, and so they change the name.
Right. Relabel.
Linda, we're out of time. We have about a minute left. What can people do?
Well, I have an email address I'll give that people can contact me, or on Facebook. My email is lindalearn1, the number 1, lindalearn1 @yahoo.com. Or you can find me just Linda Murphy on Facebook. Linda Allen is my maiden name, and I'm there with a flag speaking at a meeting. You can see that picture. So I'll be glad to share information. There are a lot of details. There are 7 recommendations I've made for amendments on this bill, which just went through the Senate. It's in the House, and we can actually let our House members know, and many of them are very unhappy, that the Senate basically hijacked what they did and made it acceptable to the governor. Well, of course, she's going to get her agenda, but with different wording.
Well, Linda, thank you. Thank you for all you're doing here, and we appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you, Charlie.
And we'll be right back after these important messages.